Our final speaker before lunch is Mr. Julian Hanna, Managing Director of MOD Resources. Julian is a geologist with over 35 years experience, including 15 years in senior management roles with a number of gold mining companies in Western Australia. Julian was Managing Director of Western Areas for 12 years before stepping down from that position in January 2012. He was a co-founder of the company and led the company during its transformation from a $6 million junior to one of Australia's largest nickel mining companies. Julian was appointed Managing Director of MOD in March 2013 and has been successfully leading the MOD team as they discover a number of copper deposits on the Kalgoorlie belt in Botswana. Thank you, Julian.
Okay, well, thank you, Duncan, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. And look, it really is great to be back at Diggers and Dealers, and particularly to have the opportunity to bring here a very exciting and rapidly unfolding copper story in Botswana, and to this forum for the first time. What we have can only best be really understood when you're on site, just to get an understanding of the scale of the Copperbelt asset that we have and the amount of work that's going on there. So I hope to sort of convey that to you as we go. So with my first slide, firstly, we have two slides here, disclaimers and all these other things. They're all contained within our presentation document here, which we released to the market this morning, and that's available in our booth, and we'd love to have you there to meet some of our team. It's booth number 119 in the sort of back right-hand corner of the tent there. Firstly, some of you probably are well aware that MOD has been in a trading halt since Friday, and we're very happy today to be able to announce some really outstanding results from the second drill hole into the large A4 dome. The A4 dome is now the second dome where MOD has discovered significant copper mineralisation. If we wind back the clock till March 2016, the first discovery hole at T3 Dome, which is 8 kilometres east of A4 Dome, was 50 metres of 2% copper. And that really set up this company to rapidly evolve to where it is today. And T3 is well on its way towards being our first long-life open-pit mine. And I'll touch on that in the second part of the presentation. So I'm going to do a bit of an unusual thing. I'm just going to talk about, initially on the first slides, just what this release is all about that we made this morning. So firstly, we announced that we had intersected 52 metres at 1.5% copper, 14 grams silver, in a vein stockwork system. It's unlike anything we've seen before in this belt. It's the second only hole into the A4 dome. And the dome shape that you see on the left-hand side is simply one cross-section of many along the A4 dome. So I'll give you a little bit more detail about domes. We live and breathe domes. We're obsessed by domes. We dream about domes. And this is the second dome that we've actually drilled after T3 Dome, which hosts our 60 million tonne T3 deposit. The detail on the right-hand side is simply just to show the high-grade veins within the system. So within the 52-metre interval, there's a 15.5 metre at 2.9% copper, some very tasty silver, 42 grams per tonne here. But within the detail of that, we have veins anything up to a metre. It's bearing in mind it's a stockwork of multiple veins here up to 15.5% copper. Intense alteration, different from anything we've seen. We're not quite sure which direction it's headed. But we're about to find out. We're swamping this with drill rigs as we speak. The next slide there, just give you an idea of how the domes have been discovered. It's all through airborne electromagnetics. We're very fortunate in that the sequence that hosts the mineralisation at T3 and now the A4 dome is very conductive. It's a 300-metre package of sediments, limestone, siltstones, mudstones, sandstones. At the top of it there's a 40-metre black pyritic shale, and fortunately for us that is a wonderful conductor, and it's very effectively defined these dome geometries. So what you're seeing there are 200-metre sections of EM data along about 5 to 6 kilometres. Even at this scale you can see that the A4 dome is a multiple of domes within this dome. So these are very strange things we're dealing with here. If we look at where the domes are located, we've got an area which we call the T3 Dome Complex. Extends over about 700 square kilometres. MOD and its joint venture partner, Metal Tiger, control all of this, this particular area of our entire Kalahari project. This is up the eastern end. There's been no prior drilling prior to the discovery of T3. And we've identified 7 of these domes which we're looking to drill. We're currently drilling in the left-hand side, the A4 dome. I'm not sure if you can see that pointer over there. So we've got 4 rigs there now. We've ordered another 3. And we're also drilling up here at the A1 dome. And in this morning's announcement, we announced that just on Friday, effectively the second drill hole into the A1 dome intersected strong, visible bornite vein-hosted mineralisation right at the end of the hole. And of course, we're really losing sleep over waiting for those rigs to start turning. It's Monday morning in Botswana right now, so the guys will be gearing up to see where that takes us. I'll just move on. There's a photograph, sorry, of the bornite core there from the end of hole as it was on Friday night, the A1 dome. The A1 dome. Just to give you an idea of scale, distance here from A4 dome to A1 dome is around about 26 kilometres. We have another deposit we're drilling out, a potential underground high-grade deposit which MOD controls 100%, which we call T1. But at the moment, our major activities are around the T3 deposit here, the open pit mine, which I'll start talking about in a second. That's moving through the feasibility stage with a decision to mine, targeted for the end of March next year. Domains, why we love domes and domes and domes. Firstly, this is about a 2 kilometre long section across the T3 deposit, and as you can see, it forms a very subtle dome structure. T3 was discovered below thick calcrete cover at about 30 metres depth, below a very subtle soil anomaly, 28 parts per million copper, about 27 parts per million zinc. It was an isolated anomaly, and we consider now that the calcrete that we see throughout this belt here has acted as a buffer for any metals in the underlying sediments to actually make it to surface to be detected. So for this reason, any prior exploration here didn't recognise that, and neither did we until the discovery hole at the middle of T3 3 years ago, that the soils anomalies that had defined all the other deposits in the eastern Kalahari copper belt were identified through soil sampling. Large, continuous, very visible copper soil anomalies at surface. When they started looking under calcrete cover in this region, the anomalies were much lower tenor and were not tested. So we have many domes in this belt, and particularly in the T3 dome complex, which we're now drilling. We have 2 deposit types. We're looking for the T3 vein style of deposit, which sits, as we call it, along the carapace of the dome or up in the upper parts. It's structurally related usually, and usually associated with veining, dissemination of chalcopyrite, bornite, chalcocite, and that's defined by those 3 different coloured domains there. And we also have a second mineralised contact, which we simply call the NPF contact, which sits at the base of our package of sequence sediments here, 300 metres below the top of these domes. So every hole we drill now, we penetrate the top of these domes, we drill through to the NPF contact, which is more than not, often than not, mineralised with chalcocite. These are just some ideas of different cross-sections across different domes, and top left you'll see the T3 dome with the open pit, which was designed as part of the feasibility study, which we announced back in the end of January this year. And you can see it sits along a structure along just below the carapace of this T3 dome here. What is amazing is that you actually see internal structures within these domes. We see areas of what we believe is alteration within these domes. We see shallow angle thrusting within these domes. We see all sorts of weird things wobbling along either side of domes, which we think will be repeats of domes, perhaps other domes at depth. The EM is seeing down to 500 metres, and really we can't think of a better targeting tool than that for drilling. So just now winding back to who's MOD. So we're the largest licence holder and copper explorer in Botswana. Our licenses both in joint venture and 100% cover 11,500 square kilometres. We dominate the central part of the Kalahari copper belt, and we have something like 9 rigs drilling today, drilling domes. T3 was discovered back in March 2016, and it was in the first hole, and this was history repeating itself for us with A4. Pretty much in the first hole we got sniffs of copper, and this is on the southern flank of the dome, and our geologist said, guys, we need to shift to the core of this dome, and the result of that is this 52-metre intersection that we've just announced this morning. We're funding our exploration through a 70-30 joint venture with AIM-listed Metal Tiger. We've been in joint venture with them from the start, 2016. And in July we announced we'd reached agreement with Metal Tiger to acquire 100% of the T3 project. We've defined a 25 square kilometre area around T3 where we'll operate our processing plant, and it's central within this area of doming, the T3 dome complex. So MOD on completion will own 100% of that project, and the joint venture will continue to explore the 8,000 square kilometres that is currently held by the joint venture on a 70-30 basis. However, MOD also has the rights to buy back the 30% held by Metal Tiger on any new discovery which reaches the scoping study level. So a lot of thought, a lot of effort, a lot of legal time went in, and a lot of hard yakka there from Steph Webber, who's in the audience out there somewhere, who's our CFO. And I hope you get the chance to meet Steph and our chairman Mark at our booth later on today. So where we are is we've also just announced last week that we're looking to list on the London main board as well. We believe that's the place for this asset. The Australian market still doesn't quite get Botswana, doesn't quite realise what a stable, wonderful jurisdiction it is to operate in, and we have built very strong relationships in the government, in the mines ministry, and throughout the community through our in-country operating company called Sekutu Metals, hence the rhino. Sekutu is Setswana for rhino. A little bit of an overview here of who we are. We've got market cap was 105 million. I think we're up about 12% today on the back of that. We've got 17 million in cash. We're fine there. Board and management, 14%. Aussie Super, Lim Asia and Metal Tiger are our 3 largest shareholders. And thanks to Duncan and his team, we get coverage from Canaccord. Just a little plug for Canaccord here. Our team, you'll meet half of these at our booth. Very experienced, not just exploration, in project development, in operations, in processing, in finance, in corporate. We've got a really rock-solid bunch of guys here. Where we are, we're the dominant licence holder in the Kalahari copper belt. And I just want to point out that Botswana largely covered by Kalahari sand, which is surprisingly not very deep in the areas where we are. Certainly, it's very shallow, maybe a metre or 2 before you hit this calcrete layer. Sits right in the middle of the most mineralised part of the Earth's surface, basically. It's not just about copper, it's about diamonds, it's about gold, it's about every metal and commodity you can pretty well think about is concentrated in southern Africa. Platinum, of course. The various copper belts there, and there's many views on whether the Kalahari copper belt here connects somehow through to the Zambian DRC copper belt. They're of a similar type deposit here. It has a peculiarity in that it has extremely high quality, high-grade concentrates, and I'll touch on that. And we've also occupying a niche there between the 1% and 2%. That's our sort of target niche in copper world that we're trying to establish ourselves in. The Kalahari copper belt, blue is being consolidated by a company called Cupric Canyon Capital. Various other historical companies there have been and gone, around about 7 million tonnes in resources up the eastern end of that belt, where the domes are largely eroded. So they're mainly mining the structural margins of anti-formal structures, which we think once were capped by domes. As you come to the southwest, all of the orange and red is MOD or 100% owned, and we think these domes, which are a major target for drilling, are our #1 kind of priority, as you can, I'm sure, understand by this stage. But we're gradually moving from the eastern of this belt for 200 kilometres towards the Namibian border. We have a very large dome complex, which we call a T20 dome complex, which we are just undertaking significant work on as well. I'll touch on T3. It was discovered in March 2016. The resource has grown rapidly from 28 million tonnes up to 60 million tonnes. We announced a PFS back in January this year based on the 36 million tonne resource. We're looking for a decision to mine within 3 years, that is March next year, and first production end of 2020. I'll leave the financial metrics here. I think you can just read them off the screen there. I'm just going to move on here. Certainly this will change. This was based on a 36 million tonne resource and a 21 million tonne reserve in an open pit. The resource base has now gone up to 60 million tonnes, so in a sense this is what we disclose at this point based on our PFS. Our initial targets based on the PFS would have, on an expanded pit operation, would get this up to around about 30,000 tonne copper a year. We're very fortunate. The geometry of T3 is, it's just a big fat lens of mineralisation, about 100 metres thick through the middle. There'll be mining widths up to 180 metres wide in the pit. We're looking at a staged pit development. It's just a very fortunate geometry for a deposit, and in all resource-wise we've got 590,000 tonnes of copper within that overall geometry there. We're also drilling out a potential underground project at T3, and we've announced that we're targeting a 10 million tonne resource underground, potentially using a 1.5% cut-off, chasing the high-grade veins that we see in the core of the open pit deposit here. Metallurgy, again, very fortunate. We get very high recoveries. It reports very well to produce a very high grade of concentrator, which is for us very important because Botswana's landlocked. We have to look at exporting this out of probably Walvis Bay, which is 1,000 kilometres by highway, right from our project, which runs right past our project, in fact, and to export it through Namibia. Our site layout, this is for our base case process plant based on the PFS, and due to the revised resource announced recently, we're clearly reviewing the scale of this project here. And just to point out that there's a highway that runs right down the axis of this copper belt. We're looking at grid power running down that highway in 2020. Resource projects, we have 3 resource projects: T3 pit, T3 underground, T1 underground. We're drilling at all of those and progressing all of those, but obviously T3 pit is now moving through that feasibility ESIA stage to try and reach that, that decision to mine at the end of March next year. Exploration, the T3 Dome complex, #1 priority. It's fascinating. It's really delivering the goods, as you can see from the drilling that we've announced today, not only at the A4 dome, but also at the A1 dome, another 25, 26 kilometres from that. And then a T20 dome complex. Again, we're very focused on that, and we're applying for an environmental permit to go and drill an area of around about 700 square kilometres over more domes in the T20 dome complex. We also have another area to the south called T7, which is a priority. How do we deal with this? We've split everything into 2 projects because of the scale. The anomalies extend in soil anomalies, subtle soil anomalies, and EM anomalies of areas that we've flown to date extend along about 140 kilometres within the central structural corridor, which you can probably see in blue. And although our primary focus has been, let's go back to there, our primary focus has been, or is and will continue to be, the T3 dome complex centred around the T3 project in this area here. We are rapidly moving into this T20 dome for very good reason, which I'll show shortly. And just to give you an idea of calcrete cover, we talk about calcrete a lot. This is typical T20 dome. It demonstrates this white rock here, calcrete. It's everywhere. It's 3 metres to 5 metres thick. Sits below a thin layer of sand. Below that you find rock. The added bonus is that there's very little oxidation in this part of the world of any sulfides below the calcrete. It's acted as a buffer to oxidation, but it's also acted as a buffer in a sense for any copper reporting to surface. One of the last slides here is simply to show the T20 dome. Again, it's all about scale. Our hometown of Hunzi, all our operations are based out of Hunzi. It's a district. It's never had a mine before. We've established very good relationships all through this belt, through farmers, through local groups, through community initiatives, and we're building a village on the edge of Hunzi for 400 people to host a construction workforce and operational team to operate up the highway here to T3. But we're now 100 kilometres west of T3. This is something like the results of 40,000 soil samples in this area and extending further to the east. But as you can see, we use zinc as a proxy for copper. It seems to report through the calcrete a little bit more predictably than copper. We have a zone of anomalies here which extends maybe 60 kilometres, maybe up to 20 kilometres across. So we have no idea what's driving those anomalies. The only drilling done by MOD is up in a little fold nose up here, a thing called T4 project back in 2015. Some shallow RC holes got very encouraging 6% hit. So for that reason, we're about to fly a huge area of EM starting next week. And just to give you an idea of sort of the domes, again, this is magnetics actually, but just showing that domal character that we see. So as I say, we are mightily obsessed by these sort of things. Employment, training, community, big part of MOD and Sekutu's social license in Botswana. We've opened community relations office in the shopping mall. We're building a village will grow to 400 people capacity, all done to an Australian standard. We've got training programs in place. We have regular visits from the Mines Ministry, from senior people in all the departments. They're very familiar, and the company Sekutu and MOD is quite well known in Botswana now. So our growth path, I think I'll just leave that on the screen for a minute. You can see that we're not holding back. We're people moving on very rapidly with this project here. And if I can leave you with that investment case slide, and then perhaps say thank you very much for your time and ask you if there's any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Julian, and congrats on the recent discovery at A4. Question down here.
Testing the microphone. Julian, two questions. One is, what is the tax and royalty regime that you have in Botswana?
Yep.
And the second one's going to be, once you get this to feasibility, what kind of indications do you have so far, and what kind of confidence do you have that you could get some bank financing to build this?
Just now, on the tax and royalty, first royalty is 5% on copper, 2% on silver, and that's net smelter. And on tax, there's a sort of a floor of 22%, and it's the whole range up to 50%. But every capital cost, every expense gets deducted prior to that. So we are looking at tax many years into the future on this project.
Sorry, because of capital, or because of?
All expense and capital is deductible of tax. And I think to get the detail of that, speak to our CFO, Steph. He's out there somewhere. I think he just put his hand up. There he is, yeah, at our booth. He'll give you a far more refined answer to that question. And sorry, your other question?
Once you get to feasibility,
yep.
What kind of confidence level do you have that you could get some bank finance?
To be honest, we have been approached by many banks. We're very selective, and we've got a very clear plan of what we're trying to do with this company now. But it has generated a lot of interest. The margins are very impressive, and the payback is short, which banks like or don't like, but it gives them that confidence. The reserve tail, all those sort of factors kick in here, and the upside.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Just another question there.
Thanks. Hi, Julian. I'm just two. How confident are you getting those approvals on time? That's usually kind of the drawback for quite a few companies, and especially in countries like Africa.
Yep.
And does the government take a stake? In other words, does it end up with like 10% or 20% of anything, or anything like that?
Yep. Just on the stake first, the government can acquire 15% in the project at a DFS completion, and so they're very aware of this project. As I say, we have high-level visits constantly here, well, not constantly, but at a regular basis. And it's a contributing, they pay basically the pro rata sunk cost. And then, sorry, the first question there? Approvals, yeah. Environmental approvals, we had a bit of a hiatus in drilling last year at T3, simply because we'd got on the back of the Department of Mines approval process. Department of Environment kicked in. So we now have a very well understood pathway to get environmental permits to drill. And this is in a region where the Environmental Assessment Act captures drilling as if it's drilling and blasting. They sort of confuse exploration with mining in their act. So we've had to convince them that this is, rehabilitated to the highest standards, all that sort of stuff. It's just a drill hole. But that's a 3-month process. And so far we've had, I think, 3 EMPs, exploration management plans, approved by the Department of Environment, and we're now applying for a 4th over the T20 dome. So it's a now well-established pathway.
Any other questions?
Good.
Just up the back there.
Congratulations on a great job so far. Thank you. Is there the agreement with Metal Tiger, is that the end of it, or is there a logical possibility of further recombination?
As far as we're concerned, that's it. It's been a lengthy process to get to where we are now, and as we've announced, they'll appear on our register as 12.5%, our largest shareholder, and but with that goes escrow provisions, with that goes restrictions on where and when they can sell. It's how they vote and a whole series of things. So we're actually very happy with the outcome of that process, and I think it enables us to streamline the financing of this project and really to unitise ultimately the whole region for whatever else we discover in the future. So no plans to move on from the current agreement. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Julian. We now have the lunch break, and we'll be back here with the next round of presentations at 10 to 2. Thank you very much.